We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech, we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
As anticipated months ago, the second wave, or tail end of the feigned first wave, is raging throughout the United States of technocracy. Once again, the manipulation and doctoring of elusive case numbers and surging infection rates have pushed little America back into the corner for a period of well-deserved and provoked time out. Yes, the trauma continues, but not only does it appear by way of social engineering media that this round is more severe than what we witnessed in March, but it is also taking on more elevated measures to quell the phantom menace known as COVID-19. What we are witnessing is a wholesale consolidation of America, the destruction of the nation-state experiment, and the deconstruction of the individualist identity. These measures are a requirement for the success of a global socio-economic repositioning. In short, a new world order. Though the infrastructure and technology is already mapped out for this repositioning, the masses are not yet aligned in unison with its offerings. Therefore, the establishing powers, in order to reach their projected goals, must shift the socio-psychological paradigm. This idea of reposition and reset is perfectly described by the efforts of globalist despot Klaus Schwab.
Allow me to give you some examples. The best way to foster a more cohesive and inclusive society, that's our theme, is to provide everybody with a decent job and income. Therefore, we will create here in Davos a public-private platform to provide 1 billion people with the skills needed for the age of the fourth industrial revolution.
The pioneer of the fourth industrial revolution that is prompting our global reset by way of crisis, of course, and urgency for emergency. The fourth industrial revolution, at its heart, is defined by the convergence of the physical, digital, and biological worlds. This is a future where transhumanism, scientism, and hyper-environmentalism, also known as ecofascism, are the building blocks and pillars of the human experience on Earth. With this future societal and industrial structure in mind, we can gather that it requires a specific type of polity to exist, a sense of uniformity and cooperation from its inhabitants. Here we understand the drive for communitarianism, the replacing of individualism with collectivism, and the utilitarian rhetoric entailed within mass campaigns of guilt, shame, and threats of group ostracism, also known as cancel culture. A type of cult group technique is employed here, with us or against us, wrong think versus right think, the requirement for a global shared view of our collective future. Schwab details in his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, we must have a comprehensive and globally shared view of how technology is changing our lives and those of future generations, and how it is reshaping the economic, social, cultural, and human context in which we live. must have a shared view on the cultural and human context in which we live, globally? How is such a feat even possible? We can hardly agree on how to run our communities. How can you accomplish a global-scale cultural consensus without infringing on the humanity of others? Well, you cannot, and force will be a requirement to do so, but not so much an Orwellian force as much as a Huxleyan one. Instead of fist and hammer only, fear, emotion, punishment, and pleasure will be employed. Hence the methods of manipulative persuasion that we have been experiencing in our local network news media. They must shift the public mind in the direction of the global economy. We are witnessing the hive mind operation right now via the current anti-scientific COVID hysteria and the anti-intellectual mission to dismantle law enforcement and systemic racism. I will term this massive psychological operation cultural renewal, renewing culture as we know it, but with a Borg-like function. This is accomplished through media news report conditioning, buttressed by repetition, newspeak terminology, anchoring via symbols, signs, and keywords, and of course, automated via big tech funded and managed algorithms, followed by indirect public support, whereby propaganda is organically cycled through populations by way of voluntary social media participation. Daily posts and shares, hashtags and trends simply become automated vehicles for the dissemination of disinformation. Smart technology and pathological use of devices provide non-stop news media and political engagement with the public. This engagement creates the social engineering platform needed for cultural renewal. In other words, cultural renewal via collective compliance tests and operations in the form of psychological operant conditioning. What's fascinating about this dynamic is the level of success that has been achieved absent of any real evidence to justify its draconian measures. When the establishing powers can succeed in acquiring full spectrum dominance over the minds and behaviors of its subjects without the assistance of reliable and reputable scientific data, well, now you have produced a taking candy from a baby scenario, whereby manufacturing consent becomes a cakewalk. What is now formed out of this multilateral operation is a consensual hyper-reality, an abstraction of reality that instructs and directs the human population via symbology, charts and graphs, rigid pragmatism and black and white thinking, models and estimations, potentialities and presumptive measures. It has come to the point that the masses are being controlled by remote and have little to no influence over their own behaviors, emotions, and state of being. The full spectrum dominance is nearly completed, such that this elusive and imaginary pandemic has granted the global authority with the ability to jail the non-compliant.
A Spokane man who tested positive for coronavirus is now in custody after refusing to comply with an isolation order. Authorities say this is the first incident of its kind here in Spokane County. The individual has been placed on a civil health hold by Spokane Health Officer Bob Lutz. Jail staff are following strict protocol already in place for COVID-19 precautions.
It's like having your water shut off for not leaving a glass of milk and plate of cookies for Santa Claus. Imagine receiving a visit from the local police, and you are told you have to spend the night in jail for a while because you have caught the cooties, and you pose a threat to the rest of the community. Dr. Pam Popper has some interesting observations regarding this hysteria.
Yesterday, so let's take a look at this. So I printed this off. This is right from the CDC's website, okay? right from the CDC's website. And so let's take a look here. It goes into some background information. COVID is really serious. We have to make up numbers all the time to keep it really serious. No, I'm paraphrasing here. Okay, remember, it's fact-free hysteria. So, all right, so here are the clinical criteria. There are so many ways you can be diagnosed. There are 15 ways that you can become a case, all right? So the clinical criteria is at least 2 of the following symptoms: fever, measured or subjective. So you can just say, I have a fever or I feel warm, check. All right. Chills, rigors, myalgia, headache, sore throat, new olfactory and taste disorders. And remember, if you're having trouble smelling or tasting anything, and there are dozens of reasons why that could be, and it affects about 25% of the population at any time. So one of the things you have to do if you want to gin up the numbers is you have to keep coming up with new symptoms, and then you can hit the numbers better, right? So either all of this subjective crap or at least one of the following symptoms: cough, shortness of breath, or difficulty breathing, or severe respiratory illness with at least one of the following: clinical or radiographic evidence of pneumonia or acute respiratory distress syndrome. So you don't really have to have COVID to be labeled COVID. You just have to have some symptoms or have something else like pneumonia, and then you can be labeled COVID. And no alternative, more likely diagnosis. Now, the laboratory criteria is really fun. And so anyway, the detection of severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, using a molecular amplification test. This is the one I wrote about last week that's 100% inaccurate, shown to be in 2006, 100% wrong, okay? So we're going to use a wrong test. If we can't get you with the fake symptoms and I just kind of feel warm today, it must be COVID. Or, you have some other disease and we're just going to call it COVID. Normally we would call it pneumonia, but now it's COVID, right? But so we can use an inaccurate test, or presumptive laboratory evidence, which is detection of specific antigen in a clinical specimen, detection of specific antibody, and this is very important, and serum, plasma, or whole blood indicative of a new or recent infection. And then it goes on to say, serologic methods for diagnosis are currently being defined. So we don't know what we're looking for because we haven't defined it yet, but if you have this thing that we don't know what we're looking for, you've got COVID. See how this works? And no wonder we have to wear masks and shelter in place and close down businesses and cancel big events and everything else, because when you get a positive test for something that you don't know what you're looking for, you must take action. Must take action. All right, there's more. All right. Epidemiological linkage is now a category. 1 or more of the following exposures in the 14 days before you develop symptoms: close contact with a confirmed or probable case of COVID, or close contact with a person with clinically compatible illness and linkage to a confirmed. So it could be a couple people away. Close contact with a person with clinically compatible illness and linkage to a confirmed case of COVID disease. So one person beyond. Travel to or residence in an area with sustained ongoing community transmission of SARS-CoV-2. So if you just went someplace where they're having a hot spot, they call it a hot spot, or an outbreak of fake lab tests, right? When you come back from the outbreak of fake lab tests, you're assumed to have epidemiological linkage. Yes, you can go look at this on the website yourself. People tell me that this isn't true. It's on the CD's website. In other words, to tell people that this isn't true, you literally have to put your hands on your ears and go, no, don't let me hear any facts. Please, no facts, no facts, no facts, no facts. So anyway, going on. Criteria to distinguish a new case from an existing case, not applicable until more virologic data are available. So why this is important is that sometimes they're counting the same person multiple times who's been tested multiple times. Isn't that fun? I'll tell you what, it is so much fun to gin up a fake pandemic. It's easier than you thought. I mean, you would have thought that in order to convince tens of millions of people that a fake pandemic is going on, you would have had to work a whole lot harder than this. But it turned out to be remarkably easy, and that should scare us all, okay? It scares me. Okay, I'm not scared of the virus. I'm scared of stupid people, and I'm scared of the government. Real scared of the government. Anybody who can make all this stuff happen is not on my side, right?
It also appears as though we will be receiving a vaccine conveniently before the new year thanks to Moderna's recent discoveries. I suspect they have had the vaccine waiting and have in fact had it ready for some time. They simply have to create the illusion of scientific deliberation to stoke the angst and codependence within the masses, to assure a grand reception of said savior jab. So imagine, if they will jail someone for having a presumptive case or false and unreliable test result that deems them infected, why would they not jail someone over mandated vaccine refusal? This incident is a mere warning, precedent, and foreshadowing of much stiffer measures to come. We already see the executive orders for indefinite mask wearing in many states. I personally believe these masks will be a permanent fixture within our society and will produce massive psychological and social problems down the line, of which I will be detailing in a later video. I would not be surprised if it comes to the point where masks are permanently required for all citizens at all times, unless vaccinated, with presentable proof of immunity documentation, of course. I also suspect that partial lockdowns and the pausing of phases will be continued until vaccines are mandated. No vaccine, no phase 4. No mask, no public participation. All of these measures demonstrate perfectly the methodology of operant conditioning, systemic reinforcement and punishment techniques used to modify group behavior, followed by communistic police state methods of control, the utilitarian mode of group over individual, state over citizen, master over slave.
And late tonight, a sobering prediction about when Americans can stop worrying about getting infected with this virus.
I hope that time will be reasonably soon. And when I say soon, I say within the next year to year and a half.